Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to show you how to make Minesweeper. To start, let's create a new sprite and let's call it Grid. After which, let's make a box, preferably a green box. And zoom in, take out that outline and make it so it covers, so it's about 24 pixels by 24 pixels. So, as you can see, mine is 24 by 24. So let's go into the code. Let's delete the my variable, create a new one, call it grid_height. Whoops. And create another one, call it grid_width. And let's set both grid width to 10 and grid height to 10. Let's create a new block and let's call it create grid. And make sure you click run without screen refresh. And at the bottom of our set grid, we're going to have the create grid function. Let's add 2 repeats and have it repeat grid width and inside that repeat grid height. And then let's pull out a go to x and go to y. We want to set x to the block size, so let's create a new variable for that. And we'll set that to 12 for now in our setup. Let's go to operators and pull out a multiplication and division for both the go to x and go to y. And then we're going to have it where we're going to set x to block size times grid width divided by 2, and y to block size times by grid height divided by 2. If we run create grid right now, we're starting on the right side, but we want to start on the left side. So if we multiply go to x by -1, we'll start on the left. Another thing is I'm going to switch the grid height and grid width variables. So we're going to repeat by grid height and then repeat grid width, and definitely do that in yours. Well, let's pull out a change x by block size and change y by block size for now. And if you run that, you should see it start on the left and go to the right and go up. But we need to make sure that after it completes a row, it goes back for another row. So what we need to do is pull out a set x to, and I'm just going to duplicate our original go to x, and then we're going to make it so after it sets the x position, we're going to have change y by -1 multiplied by block size, and this will bring it back down and loop through. Let's place a hide block in our setup and add a when I start as a clone block. In that, we want to show the clone. What we can do is create a clone in the repeat grid width loop. I was testing some things, so don't freak out with a couple of changes in the code, but don't do these changes. Go ahead and pull out 2 set brightness effects, and let's set one to -20 and the other one to 0. Let's pull them to the side over here, and let's create a variable and let's call it grid colors, and we're going to select for this sprite only. Let's go ahead and set the grid colors to 0 at the start of our create grid function. Then let's pull out 2 grid colors, set grid colors, 1 to 0, 1 to 1. We're going to have an if grid colors is equal to 0, then we're going to set grid color to 1. Otherwise, we're going to set grid color to 0. And if it's true, then we'll set brightness to 0. Else, we'll set it to -20. And we'll just put this at the top of our grid width loop. Pull out an addition and let's add our go to x with block size divided by 2. And let's put that to our go to x, and let's duplicate that and bring it down to our other go to x at the bottom of our loop. This should centralize our grid on the x, but let's now center it on the y. Let's pull out subtraction and let's subtract our y, set y with block size divided by 2, and that should perfectly center our grid. Let's duplicate our grid colors if then statement and delete the set brightness effects. Let's pull down this if statement and put it right underneath our change y by. If we run it, now you can see we have a checkered effect. If we change the grid width to 11, so an odd number, you can see it undoes the grid effect. So what we can do is have an if, we can have an if then statement around our if grid color statement. And we can have if grid width mod 2 is equal to 0, then we fix the grid colors. You can see that even when it's odd or even, it will have a grid pattern effect. I'm going to change the grid width back to 10, and let's pull out a when the flag is clicked, and let's have our setup underneath that. And let's create a new variable. Let's call it clone index for this sprite only. And let's set clone index to 1 at the start of our create grid block. Let's then change clone index by 1 after we create a clone. And then I'm just going to clean this up a little bit, make it a little bit more available. Do this over here. Okay, let's create a new list and let's call it map. And let's create a block. We'll call it generate map. And make sure you click run without screen refresh. And before we create the grid, we want to generate the map. Okay. Let's start by deleting all of the map. And let's pull out 2 repeats. Let's repeat by grid height and then grid width inside of that. And inside that, we're going to add 0 to map. And if we click generate map, we should end up with 100 if your grid width and height is 10. And should stay 100 even when you're rerunning the block. Let's create a new variable and let's call it mines. I want to hide mines, and let's set mines to 5 when the green flag is clicked at the beginning of our script. And at the bottom of our generate map block, let's repeat by mines, and let's replace item 1 to map length or length to map with 1. And this will be our mines. If you run our new script, make sure you set mines, so you have to run this full script, and you can see that we have a mine at index 100. Underneath when I start as a clone, let's pull out a repeat until, we're going to want to repeat until the clone is both touching the mouse pointer and the mouse is down. Okay, let's go into the costumes and duplicate our original costume. And in the second costume, let's decrease the brightness of the square. And then in our generate grid, let's pull out the set brightness effects, and instead let's switch it for the switch costume to costume 1 when it's true, and in the else costume 2. And I'm going to actually have the brightness just a little bit brighter. You can adjust yours as you want. I think that looks good. But when I start as a clone in the repeat, I'm going to set brightness to touching mouse pointer. And pretty much what I will do is, if it's touching the mouse pointer, it'll set it to 1. Otherwise, it'll set it to 0. And to make it a little bit more effective, you can multiply it by like 5. And now you can see the effect a little bit better. I might actually make it 7, so you can actually see it pretty good. It makes it nice to be able to tell what square you're selecting. But I want to pull out an if else statement. I'm going to also pull out a clone index, and I'm going to have item of clone index a map. If it's equal to 1, then it's a mine. I'm going to stop all for now. Otherwise, you don't die. So, and you keep going. Let's go ahead and go into our costumes, and let's rename our two costumes to Grass 1 and Grass 2. Then we're going to duplicate both of our grasses, and let's rename them to Shown, and we'll have it Shown 1, and then Shown 2. And then we're going to change the color to a more yellowish / orangish tint. And don't worry about changing the brightness, just change the color. And let's head back into the code. And let's pull out a switch costume to Shown 1 and Shown 2. And then we need to pull out an if, else, and we'll have if costume name is equal to Grass 1, so my lighter color. Then I want to switch costume to Shown 1, which is my lighter color. Otherwise, if it's the darker color, I'm going to switch it to Shown 2. And it's looking really good right now. But right now we only have a chance game, so you just go until you hit a mine. But if you notice, I have those little white lines. So what I'm going to do is just go through and really try to tweak out the boxes so I don't have that little white line there. I'm going to create a new variable. Let's call it shown, and for all sprites. And we're going to set shown to 0 right after we hide. And then we're going to change shown by 1 after we've successfully clicked on a non-mine and when I start as a clone. Let's create a new message and we'll call it shown, and we'll broadcast shown before changing the shown variable. And then let's pull out a when I receive shown. I'm just going to rearrange these blocks real fast. So in the when I receive shown, we're going to want to check whether the player has successfully clicked on all the non-mine squares. So to do this, let's multiply grid height by grid width. Let's subtract that value by mines. And that's getting our total amount of non-mines. In our operators, let's make sure it's equal to shown. And if it is equal to showed, then we can win. So let's create a new sprite and let's call it win. And I'm gonna just call our other one map real fast. I'm just gonna make a really big box for now. We'll change this later, but this will be temporary. I want to add a little text saying you win. Yay! And I want to enlarge it just a little bit and just put it there. This won't be permanent. And let's make sure we set it to 0, 0 when the green flag is clicked. And we're going to hide it. And when a new message, which we'll call win, if the game object receives win, let's go to front layer and show. Let's go into map and then broadcast in the if then statement. And now, if you somehow successfully clicked on all the non-mines, you would see a win message. And that's all for this episode. Please be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode for Minesweeper, which will be coming out here soon. Stay awesome. We'll see you next time.